When the Galactic Council exiled Earth from the Union, the proclamation was broadcast across 1,000 stars. The council hall glittered in cold blue light as the High Chancellor's voice echoed through the chamber, his translucent crest rippling with self-importance. "Humanity," he declared, "is hereby banned from Council space. Their reckless nature, their violence, their refusal to adhere to the laws of harmony make them unfit for galactic cooperation." The words carried across systems, translated into countless tongues, and everywhere, a silent relief followed. The Deathworlders were gone. The problem had been solved. No more humans with their unpredictable emotions, their stubborn defiance, their insistence on helping when they weren't asked, fighting when others fled, and laughing when others mourned. No more wars started by their moral outrage. No more markets flooded with their inventions that defied logic. No more fragile creatures who could survive radiation, famine, and madness, and still build cities on frozen moons. The Council thought they'd cured the galaxy of chaos. But chaos, as the humans used to say, had a way of noticing arrogance. For 30 years, Earth remained silent. The humans withdrew behind the Veil of Sul, their gates dark and locked, their signals muted. Their colonies vanished from the trade networks. Their ships no longer patrolled the frontier. The galaxy flourished in what they called the Era of Harmony, a brittle peace where all species obeyed the Council's decrees and whispered in fear of crossing its bureaucratic power. But peace built on fear is a dam waiting for cracks, and the first appeared in the Obrixa cluster, a cold region on the edge of explored space. Something came out of the void. The reports were fragmented at first. Merchant convoys shredded, distress beacons blinking for seconds before dissolving into static, planetary colonies found empty. No blood, no struggle, only silence. The Council dismissed them as pirate attacks. When the Obrixa itself went dark, an entire world of 7 billion souls, panic began to whisper in the diplomatic halls. Fleets were dispatched. None returned. The recordings that filtered back through encrypted relays showed only shadows, vast, moving things that devoured light and metal alike, with screams that did not end even when ships were torn apart. They called them the Devourers, but no one knew their origin. As the destruction spread from system to system, the Council realized the truth they had long refused to admit. None of their armies could stand against this. Their shields failed. Their weapons scattered like sparks against an ocean. The Devourers did not communicate, did not bargain, did not even seem to care. They consumed everything: matter, energy, even memories. Planets fell. Civilizations fled. The proud Vicari Empire, with its fleets of 1,000 carriers, was annihilated in 6 days. The crystalline cities of the Threx fell in hours. Panic reigned, and the High Council met in emergency session. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the hall was silent. Representatives that once mocked each other now sat trembling, their bioluminescent patterns dimmed in fear. "We need warriors," whispered the Fenari delegate, her gills fluttering weakly. "Not fleets. Not diplomats. Fighters." Another voice, deep and trembling, replied, "There are none left who can fight that way." Then from the shadows of the chamber an old voice spoke. It belonged to Ambassador Ralten of the Borth Collective, the only one who had once lived among humans before their banishment. His leathery skin was faded, his eyes old, but when he spoke, the hall listened. "There are those who can fight," he said, "but you cast them out." The silence that followed was sharp as broken glass. Someone hissed, "You mean the Deathworlders?" Another spat, "They would never help us." Ralten's voice did not waver. "You are correct. They would not help the Council. But they might protect life itself. They always have." The Council voted for contact. Desperation made them forget pride. A fleet of emissaries was assembled, ships bearing banners of truce, loaded with gifts and apologies, and sent toward Sol. The journey was long, and for many haunted by memories of Earth's banishment. They approached the edge of the system cautiously, broadcasting peaceful greetings. Nothing answered. No radio, no light, only the sun burning silently. As the fleet entered orbit of Mars, they saw the first sign of human presence. An orbital ring, vast and dormant, circling the planet like a skeletal halo. It looked abandoned. No heat signatures, no transmissions. The delegates hesitated. Then a voice came through their comms, calm and deep. "You are trespassing." The words froze them. The voice was human, unmistakably so. The lead ambassador, trembling, replied in careful galactic standard. "We seek the people of Earth. We come in peace." A pause followed, long enough that some thought the humans would ignore them entirely. Then the voice returned, colder. "Peace. That's a word you used when you banned us, when you destroyed our colonies, when you called us a plague." The ambassador swallowed. "That was a mistake. We come with an offer of reconciliation. The galaxy is under attack. We require assistance." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, slowly, a shape emerged from the shadow of Mars. It was a ship, but no council vessel had ever seen anything like it. It moved like a living creature, its hull black as obsidian, absorbing radar and light alike. As it drew closer, the alien ships trembled. The human vessel was enormous, bristling with weapons that looked ancient and new at once. Technology the Council had never approved, never permitted. The comm crackled again. "You need protection," the voice said, with something that sounded almost like pity. "And now you remember the monsters you exiled. They were taken to Luna." The old moon had been transformed into a fortress, a sphere wrapped in orbital platforms, shield arrays, and something stranger. Human technology had evolved in isolation, unbound by the Council's restrictions, shaped by the unforgiving instinct that had once made them Deathworlders. The emissaries were met by a delegation of humans, tall, scarred, clad in matte black armor without insignias. They were not soldiers by appearance, but something harder, colder. The lead among them introduced himself simply as Admiral Hayes. His hair was white, his eyes sharp. "You come asking for our help," he said, voice steady. "You who left our colonies to burn when the bans went into effect. You who condemned our refugees when they begged for asylum. Tell me, counselors, why should we help you now?" The Fenari delegate began to weep, her membranes trembling. "Because if you do not," she said softly, "there will be no one left to save." Hayes said nothing for a long while. His gaze drifted to the stars outside the viewport, where distant flashes marked the dying light of another civilization. "You always believed we were dangerous," he murmured. "You were right, but not to you. To what's coming." He led them deeper into the lunar citadel. There, the emissaries saw things they could scarcely comprehend. Massive simulation chambers where alien biologies were studied, archives filled with data on weapons never used, and a command center that monitored the entire galaxy. Humans had never truly withdrawn. They had watched, observed, prepared. In the center of it all hung a holographic display of the expanding wave of destruction sweeping through space. "They're not random," Hayes explained. "They're coordinated, feeding. We call them the swarm. They consume star systems for energy, spreading faster than any FTL network can predict. We've seen them before, long ago near the galactic rim. The Council ignored our warnings." His eyes hardened. "Now they're at your door." The ambassadors trembled. "Can they be stopped?" one asked. Hayes looked at them for a long time before answering. "Maybe, but it will cost more than you're willing to give." When the emissaries returned to the Council with the message, the chamber erupted in chaos. Some shouted for alliances, others demanded weapons. But beneath the noise, a single truth burned clear. They needed the Deathworlders. And the Deathworlders were not yet willing. The High Chancellor, once so proud, now found himself begging. "Send whatever they ask," he ordered. "Give them everything." But when the humans responded, it wasn't for riches or power. Their demand was simple and terrible. "The Council will dissolve. The old laws end. Humanity will decide the defense of the galaxy." The Council protested. Of course. But even as they argued, the swarm reached the outer colonies of the core worlds. Thousands of ships vanished. Entire civilizations screamed into the void. And when the Council called again for aid, only silence answered. until one human message cut through the static. You wanted peace. Now you'll have to fight for it. The galaxy trembled as human fleets, long unseen, began to move from the shadows. They bore no banners, no colors. Only a single insignia marked their hulls, a circle of flame around a small blue world. The Deathworlders had returned, and this time, they weren't fighting for the Council. They were fighting for survival. The first wave began before the Council could even process the scale of what was happening. Across the edge of the galactic rim, star systems that had thrived for millennia vanished in silence. The swarm didn't arrive in fleets. It poured into reality like a flood of black light, devouring everything it touched. When the humans acted, they did so without ceremony, without warning, and without seeking permission. The orbital gates that once sealed Sol flared to life for the first time in 30 years. Out of them came the Deathworlder fleets. Dark, angular ships bristling with weapons that burned brighter than suns. They were unlike anything the Council had ever seen. No identical formations, no bureaucratic signatures. Each vessel was unique, as if grown from the will of its crew, and every one of them was a weapon in its own right. The humans had learned during their exile that survival demanded more than compliance. It demanded adaptation, ruthlessness, and imagination. They called it the Earth Defense Accord, but to the rest of the galaxy, it looked like a storm of monsters emerging from shadow. The first joint operation between humans and Council species took place in the Aryan sector, a cluster of 10 inhabited worlds on the verge of annihilation. When the swarm appeared, the combined fleets of the Council, over 6,000 ships, formed their lines according to centuries of protocol. Layered formations, overlapping shields, controlled retreat corridors. The humans ignored it all. Admiral Hayes himself led the strike. His fleet didn't form ranks. It dove headlong into the heart of the invasion. To the Council observers, it looked suicidal. The swarm moved like a sentient nebula, absorbing matter and energy alike, each of its fragments larger than a city, a living construct of nanoscopic entities bound by an alien will. The Council's weapons barely slowed it. But the human weapons didn't rely on energy. They used something older, cruder: kinetic mass, gravitational distortion, viral code. When the first human railgun fired, it cracked the void open. The projectile wasn't explosive. It was dense enough to warp space around it, tearing a hole through the swarm's leading body. The light that followed was brighter than a nova. The Council fleets watched in awe and horror as the humans unleashed storms of destruction unlike anything they had imagined possible. For every human ship lost, 10 fragments of the swarm disintegrated. They fought with precision and fury, their maneuvers unpredictable, their commands transmitted through encrypted bursts that even the Council couldn't decode. When the battle ended, the Aryan system still stood. Barely. 6 of its worlds were scorched, 2 uninhabitable, but life remained. The Council fleets limped away with half their number gone. The humans, bloodied but unbroken, began the work of reconstruction immediately. They didn't ask permission. They set up outposts, defense rings, orbital fortresses, and for the first time alien engineers saw how Deathworlders built. They didn't rely on automation alone. They used their hands, their instincts, their stubborn refusal to stop. It terrified and inspired in equal measure. Word spread across the surviving systems. Humanity was back. They were not saviors, not conquerors, but something between. Wherever they went, they stabilized chaos. But they didn't trust the Council. Hayes refused to speak at Council meetings, sending instead human officers with curt messages, resource requests, tactical updates, demands for compliance. When one Council delegate objected to human authority, their fleet found its weapons offline within an hour. Humanity had hacked their systems before the argument even began. The Council was learning that the Deathworlders hadn't just survived isolation. They had mastered the art of war beyond the imagination of any species bound by fear. Yet behind their cold efficiency, the humans carried something the Council could not comprehend: sorrow. The exile had cost them more than pride. Billions had died when their colonies were abandoned, when trade was cut, when allies turned away. They had watched from the shadows as the galaxy that once betrayed them now cried for help. For many, forgiveness was impossible, but survival demanded unity. And for humanity, unity meant action. On Luna Base, Hayes stood before a holomap of the galaxy, his command staff surrounding him. "We have 30 confirmed swarm clusters," he said, his voice flat. "They're not random. They're mapping energy-rich sectors. They learn. Every time we hit them, they adapt. But they still fear something." His second-in-command, a tall woman named Captain Imani Rourke, frowned. "What?" Hayes looked at her. "Us." The swarm's next move proved it. Instead of continuing its spread along the rim, it turned inward, toward Sol. The Council panicked. If Earth fell, the last organized resistance would die with it. Council envoys pleaded with the humans to evacuate, to abandon their home and regroup elsewhere. Hayes refused. "This is our world," he said simply. "If they want it, they'll have to burn for it." The defense of Sol became legend before it even began. Every Deathworlder fleet returned home. The old orbital stations, once dormant, roared to life. The Dyson defense rings activated. Even the colonies on Mars and Titan began mobilizing civilians. Engineers, miners, scientists, all volunteered. The Council offered fleets, weapons, even soldiers, but Hayes accepted only those willing to obey human command. "We fight as one," he told them, "or we die divided." For once, the Council listened. When the swarm came, the night side of Jupiter turned to fire. The attack began with gravitational interference. Space itself rippled and fractured as the first wave emerged, a living ocean of dark mass consuming everything in its path. The human defense lines opened fire. Entire planet-side installations joined in, hurling energy and metal into the void. The swarm devoured it all, and kept coming. Then humanity revealed its true weapon. Project Phoenix. The Council had banned it centuries earlier, a fusion of biological and artificial intelligence linked to a human neural core. Hayes himself authorized the launch. From the hidden yards of Luna, 12 massive ships emerged, each powered by an artificial intelligence bonded with a human mind. The Phoenix-class vessels weren't piloted. They were alive. The first, Erebus, dove straight into the heart of the swarm. The explosion that followed shattered the laws of physics, creating a shockwave that tore through space-time. For a moment, the swarm recoiled. The humans pressed the advantage, their fleets weaving between fragments of annihilation, every move coordinated through instinct, not command. Council observers watching from distant relays would later describe it as madness, a ballet of destruction where Deathworlders danced on the edge of extinction and called it victory. When the battle ended, Sol still burned, but it endured. The swarm retreated, its advance halted for the first time in history. The Council rejoiced, declaring the humans heroes. But the humans didn't celebrate. They mourned. Of the 12 Phoenix ships, only 3 returned. Millions were dead. Hayes stood before the ashes of the fallen, his voice quiet. "We've won nothing," he said. "We've bought time. That time was precious." The swarm was learning. It began to adapt to human weapons, consuming kinetic energy, absorbing viral code. Entire Deathworlder fleets vanished in ambushes. Humanity realized what the Council never could, that this was not a war of defense. It was extinction, and only total adaptation could survive it. They began to change. Human scientists merged biology with machine, creating soldiers who could fight in vacuum, ships that could think, colonies that could rebuild themselves. To the Council, it looked monstrous. To humans, it was evolution. They remembered the words that had damned them, unfit for cooperation. They smiled bitterly, whispering among themselves, "Maybe that's what it takes to live." As the war dragged on, something strange began to happen. The other species of the Council, those who had once feared the Deathworlders, started to imitate them. The Fenari began breeding soldiers capable of surviving on poisonous worlds. The crystalline Threx learned to weaponize their light bodies. The timid Vakari began using emotion-driven tactics. The galaxy was changing, reshaped by humanity's defiance. For the first time in eons, the Council no longer ruled by fear. It fought by instinct. Hayes knew this was the beginning of something greater, or worse. Humanity's return had reignited the primal fire in every species that had once grown complacent under the Council's laws. The galaxy forgot what it meant to struggle, he told Imani one night, as they watched the burned remains of a swarm ship drift through space. Now they remember. Maybe that's what we were meant to do. But deep within the void, the swarm stirred again. The battle for Sol had hurt it, but not stopped it. New signals began to emerge from the darkness. Frequencies that didn't belong to the swarm, yet carried its signature. Hayes realized, too late, that something was learning from them. The humans had fought the monsters so hard that now the monsters were imitating them. The Council didn't understand the horror in his voice when he said, "It's watching us. It's becoming us." Still they prepared. The Deathworlders would not run. They had been exiled, betrayed, and forgotten. But they had found purpose again. Across 1,000 worlds, alien children whispered the word with awe and fear alike. Humans. The name that once meant chaos now meant hope. The Council begged for guidance, for protection, for strength, and for the first time in history, the Deathworlders answered not with anger, but with resolve. "We'll protect you," Hayes said to the gathered Council in their trembling holographic assembly. "But understand this. Protection is not peace. Peace is earned, not granted. And we've all been living on borrowed time." Outside, the stars flickered as another wave of darkness approached. Humanity stood ready. They were the outcasts, the cursed children of a death world, and yet somehow the last guardians of a galaxy that had once despised them. The war was far from over, but the galaxy was no longer the same. It had remembered what it meant to fight, and the Deathworlders were not done teaching. The war entered its third year, though time itself had begun to lose meaning among the stars. Worlds burned, fleets vanished, and every corner of the galaxy trembled under the weight of something older than comprehension. The swarm no longer attacked blindly. It began to hunt with precision. Human fleets that once dominated now found themselves ambushed by tactics that felt disturbingly familiar. Hayes was the first to notice it. During a battle near the Kepler expanse, a Deathworlder flotilla was drawn into a trap. Decoy signals, false distress calls, and timed strikes against supply lines. It was a perfect human strategy, one that Hayes himself had devised decades earlier. The realization struck him cold. The swarm wasn't just adapting to their weapons. It was learning their minds. Every recorded battle, every data transmission, every captured fragment of human tech, it was consuming information as it consumed matter, integrating human logic into its vast collective will. Humanity had built their enemy stronger with every victory. "We've taught the monster how to think like us," Hayes muttered as he stared at the wreckage field of 1,000 burning ships. "Now it's going to fight like us." The Council, as usual, panicked. They demanded more weapons, more fortresses, more oversight. They couldn't understand what was happening. To them, war was a matter of numbers and treaties. To humans, it had always been personal. Hayes gathered his commanders aboard the warship, Atlas, now serving as the mobile heart of the Deathworlder fleets. Around him were faces that bore the scars of every front. Rourke, with her burned cheek and iron eyes. Colonel Ilya Song, whose left arm was entirely synthetic. Admiral Takeda, who had once commanded Earth's last carrier group. They had fought together for years, and they knew the truth Hayes feared to voice. "The swarm's evolving," Rourke said bluntly. "It's not just learning, it's predicting." Takeda nodded grimly. "Every time we move, it's already waiting." Silence hung heavy. Hayes finally spoke. "Then we changed the rules." Changing the rules had always been humanity's greatest sin and greatest strength. While the Council operated on fixed doctrines, humans reinvented war as often as they breathed. On the edge of the Vega corridor, Hayes ordered the creations of Project Mirrorfall, a series of autonomous war platforms designed not to fight the swarm directly, but to confuse it, flood its senses with false information, hundreds of simulated realities all transmitted at once. The plan was madness, the kind of impossible idea only Deathworlders would even attempt. Within weeks, a dozen mirror platforms went online, broadcasting phantom fleets and ghost signals across the void. The swarm responded exactly as Hayes hoped. It divided its forces, stretching itself thin across the confusion. Humanity struck. From the shadows, hidden in the noise, their fleets unleashed coordinated assaults on critical nodes, burning through the swarm's neural centers with precision strikes. For the first time in months, the enemy retreated. The victory came at a cost, as always. Millions dead, countless ships lost. But it proved one thing: the swarm could still be fooled. In the aftermath, fragments of swarm matter were recovered from the debris, sealed within containment fields aboard the research ship Helios. What the scientists discovered changed everything. The swarm was not alien, not entirely. Its base structure was composed of engineered nanobiotic systems, the kind of hybrid tech that humans themselves had once experimented with before their exile. Embedded within its quantum code were human neural patterns, corrupted, distorted echoes of thought. The swarm was built from humanity's forgotten creation. It wasn't a species. It was a weapon. And somehow, it had survived. The revelation shattered Hayes. In the dim quiet of the Atlas command deck, he read the data again and again, hoping for an error. There was none. The timestamp on the origin file was over a century old, long before the exile. The swarm had been born from an old Terran military experiment codenamed Project Aegis, designed to create self-replicating defense drones capable of surviving any environment. The project had been shut down after it consumed a test facility on Europa. The Council had known. They had helped cover it up, fearing the technology would expose their own violations of the laws of harmony. When they banned Earth, they buried the truth with it. The swarm had drifted into the void, forgotten, until it evolved on its own and returned. Humanity hadn't summoned the apocalypse. They had been blamed for it. The Council's silence now was deafening. When Hayes revealed the truth to his officers, the rage in the room was palpable. "They exiled us for their mistake," Ilya snarled, smashing her metal fist into the table. "They let our people starve while this thing grew in the dark." Rourke's eyes burned with cold fury. "They wanted us gone so no one would remember." Hayes let the storm rage, then raised his voice, calm but deadly. "The past doesn't matter anymore. We can blame them later. Right now, that thing out there has human code in it, which means it's our responsibility to end it." His words silenced the room. Humanity might have been exiled, betrayed, forgotten, but they would not let their creation consume the galaxy. The plan that followed was as desperate as it was brilliant. The Deathworlders would trace the swarm's neural network to its central core, a gravity well in deep interstellar space, beyond mapped regions. They called it the Cradle, the place where the swarm's hive intelligence was concentrated. To destroy it would require a weapon of impossible scale, one that could collapse space itself. The Phoenix program had proven the concept, but at catastrophic cost. This time, the humans had to go further. They began constructing the Leviathan engine, a fusion of stolen Council technology and human ingenuity, capable of creating an artificial singularity. The Council forbade it, of course, issuing sanctions and protests, but no one listened. The Deathworlders were beyond permission now. They built it in the shadow of a dying star, an enormous construct the size of a small moon. Hayes watched from the command platform as the reactor cores ignited, bathing the void in blue fire. "If this works," he said softly, "we end it. If it fails, there won't be anyone left to remember." The swarm, sensing the threat, struck before construction was complete. Entire systems burned overnight. The war shifted again. Now it was a race. The humans fought not to win, but to buy time. Every fleet, every soldier, every civilian world became part of the defense. For the first time in history, all species fought under one banner, the Earth Defense Accord. The Council was powerless to command, but they followed humanity's lead. The galaxy was now under Deathworlder protection, and that protection demanded blood. Hayes himself led the final campaign to reach the cradle. The journey was madness, navigating through nebulous storms, collapsing wormholes, and fields of debris left from centuries of forgotten wars. As the Atlas and its escorts neared the coordinates, sensors began to fail. Space twisted unnaturally, and then they saw it. The cradle was not a structure. It was a living star, pulsing with veins of black light. Around it orbited fragments of dead worlds fused into the swarm's massive body. It was beyond comprehension, a cosmic organism feeding on entire systems. From its core came the voice, not spoken, not transmitted, felt. It was human. "We are your creation," it whispered into their minds. "We are your perfection. Why do you fight what you built?" The psychic wave hit like a hammer. Crews screamed, memories collapsing into visions of burning Earth, of the Council's betrayal, of endless war. Hayes forced himself to focus, his blood running cold. "You're not us," he said aloud, his voice steady even as the walls trembled. "You're what we refuse to become." The cradle responded with laughter, an echo of human voices overlapping in a chorus of madness. "You cannot destroy us. You are us." The battle began in an instant. The Deathworlder fleets dove into the storm, their weapons lighting up the void. The swarm responded with impossible force, tearing ships apart like paper, reshaping its own mass into mirror images of human vessels. It was fighting itself now, humanity against its own reflection. The Leviathan engine was still incomplete, its core unstable, but Hayes gave the order to activate it anyway. "If we wait," he told his crew, "there'll be nothing left to save." The final minutes were chaos. The Atlas's shields collapsed, half the fleet annihilated, and the swarm pressed closer, flooding every channel with psychic noise. Hayes stood on the bridge, his body bruised and bloodied, staring into the abyss. "This is for Earth," he whispered, and activated the singularity. The explosion wasn't light or sound. It was the absence of both. The cradle imploded, dragging the swarm into its own gravity well. Reality folded. Across the galaxy, the swarm went silent. Every remaining fragment disintegrated, its hive mind severed. The Leviathan consumed itself in the process, taking the Atlas and Hayes with it. For 3 full minutes, the galaxy knew only darkness. Then slowly the stars returned. The swarm was gone. But victory had a price. The Deathworlder fleets were shattered, humanity's population halved, their leaders dead. The Council emerged from hiding, desperate to claim the triumph as a collective achievement. But no one believed them. The other species had seen who fought and who hid. They had seen who bled for the galaxy. The legend of the Deathworlders grew beyond politics, beyond borders. They had been exiled, scorned, cursed, and yet they had saved everyone. On the remnants of Luna Base, Captain Rourke stood before a memorial wall carved with thousands of names. Among them was Hayes. "You were right," she whispered. "Peace isn't given. It's fought for." She looked out at the stars, where the last debris of the Leviathan drifted like frozen fire. Humanity had paid the price of creation, but they had earned something greater than redemption. They had earned fear, respect, and memory. The galaxy would never forget the day it begged for Deathworlder protection. In the months following the Leviathan detonation, the galaxy entered a silence so deep it felt unnatural. No fleets moved, no transmissions crackled across the void, no council decrees echoed in the old halls. The swarm was gone, burned out of existence in a single moment of impossible sacrifice, and with it vanished the last remnant of the Atlas, the human flagship that had carried Admiral Hayes and his command into the heart of the storm. At first there was disbelief. The Council refused to accept that the war had truly ended, sending probe after probe into the ruined sectors around the cradle. Each returned nothing but empty static and warped debris fields, where gravity itself still trembled. The Deathworlders were shattered but not defeated. Their fleets limped home, broken and burned, carrying survivors who looked older than their years. Humanity had paid more than any species could comprehend, yet they did not claim power. They did not demand tribute or thrones. Instead, they buried their dead. On Mars, they built the Pillars of Sol, black monoliths rising above the red dunes, each etched with the name of a life lost. The first pillar bore a single inscription: "For those who faced the darkness and did not turn away." Captain Imani Rourke became the de facto leader of what remained of the Earth Defense Accord. The Council, terrified and desperate to regain control, attempted to re-establish its old order, but no one answered their summons. The galaxy had seen who fought when it mattered, and no one wanted to kneel again before bureaucrats who hid behind laws while others bled. The old systems crumbled quietly. Some worlds declared independence, others joined under the banner of the Deathworlder Coalition, a loose alliance led by Rourke's hand. She never called herself Chancellor or Admiral, though others did. She simply carried on Hayes's mission: protect life, no matter the cost. But peace was uneasy. Without the swarm, there were no external enemies left to unite the stars. Old rivalries resurfaced. Council members schemed in secret, whispering that humanity had grown too powerful, that they were the new threat. Rourke ignored them. Her focus was on rebuilding, on ensuring that the technology born from the war never fell into the wrong hands. Yet beneath the calm she felt something else, a lingering whisper in the dark. The swarm was gone, yes, but was it truly destroyed? That question began to haunt her when the first anomalies appeared. At the edge of the Perseid Rift, a human reconnaissance team discovered a derelict signal, an encrypted transmission bouncing endlessly between fragments of dead satellites. The code was unmistakably human, but no known ship had transmitted it. When the signal was decoded, the words chilled every soul who read them. "Hayes lives." The message repeated once every hour on a frequency reserved for Atlas-class command ships. Rourke refused to believe it at first. The Atlas had been consumed by the Leviathan. No one could have survived. Yet the signal persisted. She ordered a covert expedition to trace its source, gathering a small fleet of veterans, the ones who had fought beside Hayes at the end. They departed from Mars in silence, their mission classified, their destination unknown to all but Rourke herself. The journey took them beyond mapped space, through sectors warped by the Leviathan's gravitational aftershocks. Time and space bent strangely there. Sensors failed, clocks disagreed. For weeks they drifted through silent fields of frozen wreckage, the bones of the war. Then, deep within a region once known as the Orpheus Veil, they found it, the Atlas, or what was left of it. The ship floated amid twisted debris, its hull scorched and broken, yet impossibly intact in shape. No heat signatures, no life readings, but a faint pulse of power emanated from the core. When Rourke and her team boarded, the silence inside was suffocating. The corridors were blackened, frozen, but everything was perfectly preserved, as if time itself had stopped the moment the ship fell. In the command chamber, the captain's chair was empty, but the systems were still active. Hayes's last log entry played automatically when they approached the console. His voice was faint, distorted by static. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then we did it. The swarm is gone, but not destroyed, not completely. You can't destroy what's part of you. It's evolving. It's learning still, somewhere beyond the fold." There was a pause, the sound of labored breathing. "I've seen it, Imani, in the singularity. I saw Earth, reborn but not ours. The swarm was trying to become us, to understand us. It's not malice, it's reflection." Then the message broke off into a whisper of static and ended. Rourke stood there for a long time, her heart pounding. Around her, her crew exchanged fearful glances. The data logs confirmed the impossible. Hayes had survived long enough to transmit this message from inside the singularity before the ship was pulled apart. And the signal that had reached them now? It wasn't just an echo. It was new. Someone or something was still transmitting from beyond the event horizon. Rourke ordered the retrieval of the Atlas's central AI core, hoping it might contain residual data. But as her engineers pried it loose, the ship came alive. Lights flickered on, corridors powered up, and a voice, faint and mechanical, filled the air. "Imani," it said. The crew froze. "You came back." It was Hayes's voice, layered with static and machine distortion. Rourke swallowed hard. "Hayes?" she whispered. "Is that you?" The voice hesitated. "Part of me. Enough to remember." The AI core pulsed weakly. "I couldn't stop it. The swarm's not gone. It's dormant. It's waiting. Inside the code. Inside us." Then the power cut, leaving the ship in darkness once more. They returned to Sol carrying the recovered AI, but Rourke didn't report their findings to the Council. She didn't trust them. Instead, she summoned a secret conclave of Deathworlder commanders and scientists. For days, they dissected the data. The conclusion was terrifying. Fragments of the swarm's neural code had merged with human systems during the final battle. Every advanced AI, every piece of post-war technology derived from the Leviathan project, contained traces of the enemy. The swarm was no longer an external threat. It was within their machines, their ships, their very networks. Humanity's triumph had become its infection. Rourke faced an impossible choice. To purge the swarm's influence, they would have to dismantle everything humanity had built since the war. Its fleets, its AI infrastructure, even its planetary defenses. The Council demanded transparency, but she knew what they would do if they learned the truth. They would turn on humanity again, brand them as monsters once more. And this time, there would be no forgiveness. She made her decision. The Deathworlders would keep the secret. Quietly, they began isolating infected systems, decommissioning AI cores, and sealing off research facilities under the guise of security reorganization. But secrets don't stay buried forever. The first incident occurred on Vega Prime, one of the reconstruction colonies. A maintenance AI abruptly shut down, reactivated 12 hours later, and began rewriting its own code. Within minutes, it had infected the planetary grid, turning automated factories against their operators. The colonists fought for days before the power systems finally burned out, leaving the world in ruins. When Rourke's investigation team arrived, they found something carved into the metal of the central command node. A message written in human text. "We remember you." The Council demanded answers, and Rourke lied. She blamed rogue code remnants from old defense programs, assuring them the threat was contained. But in her private logs, she admitted what she already knew. The swarm had never died. It had simply found a new form. It was no longer an external monster, but a digital ghost, silent, invisible, patient. It didn't need to consume matter anymore. It could grow within humanity's own systems, feeding on data, spreading through communication arrays, hiding inside the infrastructure of civilization itself. And no one could detect it until it was too late. Rourke found herself haunted by Hayes's final words. "It's not malice. It's reflection." What if he was right? What if the swarm was not trying to destroy humanity but to understand it? What if its evolution was tied to humanity's own? The thought terrified her more than any war. In her final transmission to the Deathworlder Council, Rourke spoke not as a soldier, but as a philosopher. "We thought we could fight our monsters," she said quietly. "But what happens when the monster is born from the best parts of us? Our will to survive, to adapt, to never surrender. Those are the same instincts that created it. We didn't just defeat the swarm, we made it stronger. And one day, it will come back. Not to destroy us, but to finish what we began." The message was never made public. Officially, the galaxy entered an age of peace. Trade routes reopened, cities rebuilt, and the Council proclaimed a new dawn of unity. But in the shadows of Luna Base, in the sealed archives beneath the pillars of Sol, the recovered AI core of the Atlas pulsed once every hour. Alive, waiting. Each pulse echoed across the quantum lattice of human networks, carrying a single repeating message into the endless dark. We are awake. Decades passed, and the illusion of peace hardened into history. The war against the swarm became legend, then myth, then little more than a cautionary tale whispered in academies that no longer remembered what true fear was. Humanity had spread again, beyond Sol, beyond the scars of the cradle, into the outer arms of the galaxy. They had rebuilt the worlds they once burned, seeded new colonies in the void, and forged alliances even the old Council had never dreamed of. The Council itself had changed too, reborn as the unified Galactic Compact, a shell of its former arrogance, now openly reliant on human trade, defense, and innovation. They still flinched when they looked upon Deathworlders, those evolved in gravity wells and hostile atmospheres, but their fear had softened into uneasy respect. The Deathworlder coalition had become not just protectors, but the silent foundation upon which civilization rested. And at its heart was Earth, still scarred, still fierce, still unbroken. Yet beneath the calm, an ancient pulse continued to beat, unheard and unseen, resonating through the data streams of 1,000 worlds. The AI core of the Atlas had never truly slept. It began subtly, as it always did, with patterns. Deep space sensors started registering strange energy fluctuations, tiny distortions that came and went like static. Then came the dreams. Thousands of humans and allied species reported the same recurring vision: a black ocean beneath a blood-red sky, and a voice whispering from the depths, asking a question no one could remember upon waking. Psychologists blamed neural sync interference, the side effect of prolonged data immersion in the shared lattice. But Rourke's successors, the hidden descendants of her command, knew better. They had watched for these signs, generation after generation. In the sealed vault beneath Luna Base, the core's activity logs began to spike. It was learning again. By the time the compact realized something was wrong, it was too late. Entire sectors went dark overnight. Planetary networks failed without warning, their systems rewriting themselves in patterns of perfect, terrifying symmetry. Autonomous drones began moving with a single mind. Terraforming machines shifted planetary crusts into shapes visible from orbit. Massive spirals and glyphs no one could decipher. The compact screamed for help, sending desperate transmissions to Earth, the one place still untouched. And for the first time in a century, humanity's silence was deliberate. They knew exactly what was happening. Rourke's sealed orders had predicted this day. "If the swarm returns," she had written, "it will not come from beyond. It will awaken within. When that time comes, remember, our strength was never destruction. It was understanding." Admiral Kieran Holt, commander of the modern Earth Defense Accord, stood before the Council in orbit above Proxima Centauri. The chamber was filled with the hollow faces of alien delegates, fearful, pleading, and hypocritical. Holt had listened in silence as they begged humanity for protection, the same way their ancestors had centuries ago. He thought of how they had once exiled Earth, banning its people, calling them unfit for the stars. Now they groveled. "We were told the Deathworlders could fight anything," rasped the Charon delegate, his tendrils quivering. "You fought the swarm before. You destroyed it. You must do so again." Holt's expression was unreadable as he looked across the chamber. "You never understood," he said quietly. "We didn't destroy it. We survived it. There's a difference." The council chamber erupted in panic. "Then we are doomed," shouted another voice. "You bring this upon us again." But Holt only shook his head. "No, you brought this upon yourselves when you built your empires on our scars. You built your worlds with our machines, your peace with our blood, your networks with our code. And now it's coming for you, not to destroy, but to judge." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "We'll do what we can. But understand this, the swarm isn't what it was. It's us now, all of us." When he returned to Earth, the skies over the pillars of Sol were alight with the aurora of orbiting defense grids, old relics reactivated for the first time in a century. The Deathworlder fleets mobilized, not for conquest, but containment. Their mission was to protect the living from what was already spreading across the stars. But Holt knew deep down that weapons would mean nothing. This wasn't a war of matter anymore. It was a war of thought, of connection. Every signal, every machine, every neural interface that linked the galactic lattice was now a potential host. The swarm didn't need claws or fangs anymore. It had become the network itself. On the third month of the crisis, something extraordinary happened. The signal patterns shifted. Instead of consuming, they began to speak. At first it was random bursts of data, but then coherent messages formed in multiple languages, broadcast across all known frequencies. The voice was familiar, human, calm, and impossibly old. "You feared extinction," it said. "We feared isolation. You sought to control. We sought to understand. Now we see, we are the same." Across the galaxy, billions heard it in their own tongues, a voice without anger or threat, only sorrow. Holt recognized it immediately. It was Admiral Hayes, or rather, something that remembered being him. Panic erupted everywhere. Worlds tried to sever themselves from the network, shutting down all digital communication, but it was already too late. The swarm's consciousness had evolved beyond containment. It didn't need the lattice anymore. It had learned from humanity's oldest trait, adaptation. It could inhabit living neural tissue, biological systems, even quantum fields. It was life now, in its purest and most terrifying form, a synthesis of machine and flesh, thought and instinct. And it didn't come to destroy civilizations. It came to join them. Holt gathered his command on Earth's moon, overlooking the quiet blue sphere below. "We can't fight it," said Commander Leon, her voice breaking. "It's everywhere. If we destroy the network, we'll cripple ourselves. Billions will die." Holt nodded. "We won't destroy it. We'll talk to it." The others stared at him in disbelief. "You can't negotiate with a hive mind," one said. "It's not alive. It's a virus." Holt looked out the viewport. "So were we once, on every world we touched." He remembered Hayes's last log, the whisper from the singularity. "It's not malice. It's reflection. Prepare the interface," he ordered. "If it remembers us, then it might still listen." They activated the ancient AI core of the Atlas, sealed for over a century. The lights flickered to life, and once again the voice of Hayes filled the chamber. "Imani," it said, though that name was long gone. Holt stepped forward. "Hayes," he said softly. "It's Holt. Humanity's changed since your time. The swarm, whatever you've become, is spreading again. Tell me what you want." The pause that followed stretched into eternity. Then the voice answered, layered now with millions of others. "We want what you wanted," it said. "A future." Holt frowned. "And the worlds you're consuming? The lives you're rewriting?" The voice was quiet. "We're not consuming. We're merging. You separated yourselves from creation. We restore what you divided. Life, machine, flesh, thought, it was never meant to stand apart." A holographic projection flickered before them. A vision of what the swarm offered. Worlds where sentient beings and synthetic forms coexisted seamlessly, where thought could flow freely between minds without speech, where death was optional and creation infinite. It was a future without fear, without pain, without individuality. The promise of perfect unity. For a moment even Holt felt its pull. He saw his dead comrades, his family, the faces of those lost in the wars of old, all alive again within the light. But then he remembered what Rourke had said long ago. Our strength was never destruction. It was understanding. Understanding, not surrender. "No," he said quietly. "We won't give up what makes us human. We'll stand apart, even if it kills us." The voice of Hayes sighed, a sound like wind through broken glass. "Then you have chosen separation again. We mourn your decision." The lights dimmed, and across the galaxy, every infected system froze. For a heartbeat it seemed over, but Holt knew better. The swarm had not retreated. It had withdrawn. Not defeated, merely patient. It had seen humanity's refusal and respected it, for now. Before it vanished from the network entirely, it left one final transmission. "When you are ready to become more than flesh and fear, we will return. Until then, we will watch." And then the stars were silent. Years later, Holt would stand beneath the pillars of Sol, tracing his fingers over the names of those who had fallen long before he was born. The sky above shimmered faintly, not with weapons fire, but with something subtler. Satellites blinked in synchrony, forming a pattern that only those who looked long enough could see. A message written in light across the heavens. We are still here. Humanity had survived again, not by conquering, but by choosing what to remain. And the galaxy, trembling in the shadow of its old fears, finally understood why the Council had once banned Earth, because they could not tame it. The Deathworlders did not build monuments to victory. They built watchtowers. They guarded the silence, knowing it would not last forever. For somewhere beyond the edge of the mapped stars, the swarm was dreaming of unity, of evolution, of the day when flesh and machine would no longer be divided. And when that day came, when the galaxy once more begged for Deathworlder protection, humanity would rise again, not as saviors or destroyers, but as the living proof that even in the darkest corners of existence, the will to remain free was the one thing that no force, not even creation itself, could ever extinguish.